Australia. Speaking of huge wins for rugby, the massive news this week that Mark Nawaqanitawase has informed the Sydney Roosters, as reported in the Sydney Morning Herald, that he will be leaving rugby league at the end of 2026 when his contract with the Roosters runs out, and he will return to rugby because it is his dream to play in the World Cup on home soil in 2027. Mark Nawaqanitawase and his form in rugby league has been a huge talking point for both rugby league fans and rugby union fans. This is a significant, I think, a news moment, Goog, for rugby that Mark has identified. I'm loving rugby league, but I just have to be part of that World Cup in 27.
What a great example of an athlete that is chancing at a very young age, taking a huge risk, finding all sorts of adversity when he started. So, you know, Australian men's sevens program sort of got him into sort of the mindset of training like a professional and exposing himself to the international stage and getting some open space. Waratahs, starting 15, worked his way through, then took a big punt when he was seemingly going to reach the crescendo of his rugby union career and be assured Wallabies, to go across the league and deal with what he's dealt with. A fantastic story. A great story about athletes that put themselves in harm's way on the field and off the field career-wise, that build resilience and maturity along the way, carry themselves with pride and integrity, and notify a team and a sporting organisation that's given them a great opportunity as well, early enough for them to prepare for his exit. You know, that's a great story. And it's not league v union. This is a great Australian sporting story happening before our eyes. Love it.
There's a league v union element in it, which I'm going to come back to. I'll come back to because it's quite a funny talking point. But I want to ask Hoops, have you had anything to do with this? Because a few weeks ago on Inside Line, you were asked if rugby should get him back, and you said they should be absolutely desperate to get him back.
Well, define who rugby is, because RA don't have him back yet.
Yep.
And we should be clear on that, because he can play for Italy, Fiji or Australia at this 2027 World Cup. And he would be very proud to represent a Fiji at a 2027 World Cup. So there's actually a little bit of work that needs to go on to making sure that RA secure this bloke back in the team. Now, to say that, we're covered with wingers, I don't think is a good way to treat a talent like that. Look, I'm just really happy for Mark. He's a great person. He's a generational talent. We've talked about a couple here already today. He's gone away. He's challenged himself in a great environment. You've got to tip the hat to someone like a Trent Robinson, who just manages to produce just great, outstanding players and take a punt on someone who was a union player, saw potential in him as a league player and goes and delivers. So, the Roosters there really have a class outfit, and it's a tip of the hat to them. And then also, allow him to come back here and come back to rugby potentially and unlock a childhood dream for the guy. Like, it's a super exciting story, and I think it's that type of an athlete deserves the ability to bounce across codes. Like, the guy is an absolute freak. He's a good person. He just wants to have as much opportunity to succeed in different jerseys as he possibly can. And I didn't see anything wrong with how Sonny Bill did it. Like, the guy, did what he did, went back and forth, played some different things, tried his hand, and now he finishes his career and goes, I'd really tried everything. Now, I don't think Mark's going to get into the boxing side of things, but, I think how cool is to finish your career and say, I really gave it a crack at everything. And there's no question that Mark is doing that.
Well, Mark could jump on a Stan Sport pay-per-view boxing fight night one night. I'm sure we could work a deal. Interesting point that Hoops raises there around, if Mark doesn't sign with Rugby Australia and doesn't come back to rugby via a Super Rugby Pacific team and does opt to go and play in Japan or France, the UK, wherever it may be, there is the possibility that he could play the 2027 Rugby World Cup for Fiji or Italy and not Australia. Has he made any indication? Tom, it was your stablemate Michael Chemis who reported that he's informed the Roosters he's going to leave. Has he indicated at all that he wants to play for any particular nation?
I mean, he hasn't gone on the record or done any interviews at the moment, but look, I would be surprised if it wasn't the Wallabies, but as Michael completely rightly points out, he's entitled to do whatever he wants. RA would be crazy to not come talking. Given the fact he's effectively, through that story, indicated that he doesn't want to play Super Rugby, it would be a unique situation. Like, normally guys on RA top-ups are sort of based in Australia, so they would need to get a little bit flexible with that. But for a 6-month deal, he could potentially play top league season and finish earlier in 2027, I would imagine, maybe end of May. He could potentially play in Japan and then sort of roll into a test season in 2027. But, yeah.
Would you be trying to to avoid him, Mark, potentially representing one of those other nations in 2027, Goog, when he finishes with rugby league at the end of 2026 NRL season, you'd be trying to get him back involved in whatever's left in that test campaign next year, whether it's the Northern Hemisphere tour or the back end of a test season here in Australia?
Well, again, you try everything you could, but ultimately, to Hoops' point, it's going to be his choice, right? Which is the great thing that he's displayed already. He makes mature, considered choices and makes it work. There's no option for him, seemingly, other than to make it work. So, absolutely, he's got to have the lens of where is the improvement for him as a player and an athlete, and then, of course, along the way, he's going to be paid accordingly, And you look at Landy's comment there. I have no problem with him being picked for the Kangaroos. He will put thousands of bums on seats at Wembley. So that's what every sport in Australia should have a focus on: grow the game, capture hearts and minds, and absolutely he does that as well. So there's lots of positives.
I just think it's worth mentioning that obviously players need to be remunerated well, and he's someone that is going to be paid very well. But players also love being looked after a lot. And he's going to have he's had a truckload of footy and will have a lot of footy going into 2027. So he does another full league season. And then, how do you manage him from the back end of 2026? Because then he goes and assumedly plays somewhere else and then rolls into, 2027 World Cup where we need him at his best. Because I say we, because I'd love to see him in an Australian jersey, that's for sure. So how do you manage him? And that, in my opinion, might not be going on a spring tour. That's go and play for whatever club and in whatever place you're going to play for. But then maybe once that wraps up, could we get you into a Waratah jersey, but a Super Rugby jersey for 1 and 2 games? You might pick up the back end of that season if he's playing somewhere that allows that. Europe, probably not. Japan, maybe. And then you just can really manage a player. So if RA, are serious about having a Marky back in the jersey, that's something that I'm sure he would love to hear, is we've got a real plan for you being able to hit your straps, even though he's seemingly hitting his straps at the 27 World Cup final. That's what you've got to be thinking. When
I mentioned before that it is a little bit of rugby league, rugby union.
Obviously the leagueies were very salty about Suoliti coming over as well and won back, and they hoped that Mark would have stayed. I mean, his deal's until October 30 next year, so I mean, depending if the Chooks went out early, he could potentially get an early release like Suoliti, spring tour, he's on the cards. But again, you're right, Michael, they've got to manage him there. But the other one, Max Jorgensen's locked into 26. He's not done for 27 yet on the dotted line. So you've got 2 guys there. So searching for a back 3. RA's going to have 2 conversations there.
Interesting. And maybe rugby league might try and get involved as well and try and take Max away
Chooks
from rugby union.
And it'll be great.
RA have so much cash now, so they can spend it.
I think there might be some dispute on that. Yeah. Hoops, we know obviously Mark has played rugby a lot prior to going to rugby league. But after 2 years away from the game, if he was to come back to rugby, when he comes back to rugby back into next year, less than 12 months for a World Cup, is that enough time to get repatriated to the game?
Yes, I think it is. I think he was a rugby league player before he was a rugby union player. So he seemed to have picked that up pretty quickly after not playing it for a much longer time. So he's at an age where he's really hitting his prime, and it's just going to take a few games, couple of training sessions for a bloke of that quality to switch it over and just to be able to start turning it on. Yeah, it might be a bit of rust. Game 1, Game 2, just the way the ball moves and flows and sets and, the differences in league and the nuances and hitting breakdown and cleaning out at body height, below sort of, the bar that you try and set for good clean outs. That's going to be a bit, it'll take Marky back a bit, but, it's not going to take a player like that long.